Children, smartphones and screen time. If you are anything like me, you will have obsessed about it, worried about it and tried to find solutions to a very 21st century problem. Well, somebody who's been campaigning on this issue is the actress Sophie Winkleman, married to Lord Freddie Windsor, a royal, but very keen to share her ideas on how we need to get EdTech out of schools and return to good old-fashioned pen and paper. Welcome to the Daily Tea with me, Camilla Tominey. Sophie Winkleman, welcome to the Daily Tea. Should I call you Winkleman? I don't know what to call you. Should I call you Windsor? Winkleman Windsor?
Don't do that.
Why?
The two together is a very, very bad combination.
What, just
Either
WW?
or. Pick your poison.
What do you prefer?
I don't mind. I like Windsor's pretty chic.
Windsor's great, isn't it?
It's really good. But Winkleman's sort of sweet and cuddly. So whatever you want.
Do you accept that some people just like calling you Big Suze?
I do
you
accept that now.
Do people shout that?
They don't shout it, but occasionally people get very adorably excited.
And do you know that Peep Show's had this massive revival among the Gen Zs, that my two eldest children, eldest, I think it's oldest of two, oldest of three.
Yes, I think you're right.
So the two big uns,
Yeah.
16 and 14, have rediscovered Peep Show and think it's great. And then I asked her today, why are you watching that? Is it a Y2K thing, which for the uninitiated means year 2000?
Okay.
She said, no, it's like a kind of like, you know, tragic middle-aged kind of aesthetic. I was like, oh, we loved that show when it first came out.
I'm glad about that, but I think my agent must have screwed something up because I got paid about $3,000 in total for that, and I've never seen a shilling of residuals.
But you were in
Maybe
it
I should ring them.
for months and years, weren't you? You were like
Yeah.
the main,
I think
apart
they
from
yeah.
Mitchell and Webb, you were the girl.
I was one of the girls. I had a quite relaxed agent at that point.
That's annoying,
I
isn't it?
know.
And are you still acting in things?
I am, yes. I've just finished a very well-written drama for BBC One by a very brilliant girl about a group of horrible, competitive, wealthy mothers and their very screwed up teenage daughters.
Oh, I love the sound
it's
of
very
that.
good, I have to say.
Is that
You've
kind of
got
a
to watch that.
Netflixy thing, or where's that
BBC
going?
One on probably October. You've got to look out for that. It's
Are
called
you-
Wild Cherry.
May I ask, are you playing a bitch or are you playing a nice person?
I'm playing a complete maniac, which is really fun. It's worryingly easy.
Good.
Yes.
And in a professional capacity, are you Winkleman?
Yes. Yes.
And can we clear up your relationship to Claudia? You are...
You may. My father was married to Eve Pollard and had Claudia. Then 8 or 9 years later, married my mum and had me. So we're half sisters.
Great. And in general, we have to just touch on the royal thing.
That's fine.
Now, which I know sometimes embarrasses you probably. Did you know that when I was a young hack at the Sunday Express, I was outside your wedding at Hampton Court Palace with my notebook, waiting for people to arrive and depart all that Saturday. So while you were getting married, I was one of the rat pack outside. Say, oh look, it's Camilla Parker Bowles, which is a bit embarrassing in retrospect.
That's really funny. I
I
didn't know that.
Back in the early days
I
of
don't
my
remember
career.
a single thing about it. I mean, nothing.
What, of the wedding day?
No. It was such a blur because we had to move to Los Angeles the day after and I had to start a brand new job the day after that. So we got married on Saturday and moved everything, our whole lives, out to America the day after. And I'd been so concentrating on the work that I hadn't thought about the wedding, which meant that my hair was so disgusting. And
Was
Freddie
it?
still gets upset about it. It was just disgusting. And my mother-in-law chose my dress, which was very sweet and puffy, but I looked barking.
Your mother-in-law chose your dress?
Oh, yeah.
This is unconventional. Just to point out the familial relationships here. So your in-laws are Prince and Princess Michael of Kent, and Prince Michael of Kent, your father-in-law, is the late Queen Elizabeth II's first cousin.
Very good.
You have appeared on Buckingham Palace balconies and things, but just very briefly, why did the princess choose your wedding dress?
She sort of took it all over, and I actually didn't mind at all. I thought, great, do everything. I was concentrating on this acting job and saying goodbye to my darling granny who wasn't very well and just
Aw.
doing other stuff. So she did absolutely everything, which is sort of, I didn't really mind. But now I look back on it and think, I should have worn a simpler dress and I should have got my hair blow dried by someone who'd done it before.
Oh, okay, fair enough. And finally, was it weird having the Queen and others to your wedding?
I don't think the darling Queen came.
Didn't she?
No.
Oh.
Lots of very
Do
nice
you know what? I
people
should know
came.
that as I actually reported on it. I could have written Queen snubs. Winkleman
Thank
wedding.
you for not doing that. No, I don't think the Queen came. I don't think quite a lot of them came,
No,
which is fine.
fair
I've
enough.
got much more friendly with them as I've got to know them.
Who are you friendliest with?
I love all of them.
Do
I'm
you?
a complete groupie. I love them.
Yes.
They're
Must be
really
fun.
nice.
Must
It's really
be fun, like family events and things. Well, they're family. Blood's thicker than water, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Well, family isn't always brilliant, but
No.
this lot are very sweet.
They've been welcoming and accommodating and friendly towards you.
Yes.
So you and I met, I think, kind of through the Centre for Social Justice, which is the think tank that was set up by Tim Montgomery and Sir Ian Duncan Smith, because we kind of have a passion, don't we, for, I don't know, trying to solve some of the nation's problems, particularly when it comes to young people and children. And we're both mums, and then we kind of connected even further about this whole screen use amongst children, which we'll get into in just a moment. But before we do that, just talk me through, obviously we know the headlines and your career and acting and the Royals and all the rest of it, but what kind of childhood did you have?
I was very irritatingly lucky. I have two very wonderful parents who I'm far too close to. It's actually awful how close I am to them. My dad's going to be 86 on Wednesday, and I just can't bear it. I wish I liked them less. I grew up in Primrose Hill before it had a Space NK, when it was still quite shabby and full of lentil
Nice.
shops.
It was like the poor relation to Hampstead.
Exactly. It
Yes.
was the poor, scruffy, cosy relation. I wouldn't go that far, but it definitely wasn't grand like it is today. And I was very lucky. I went to City of London School for Girls, which I had a wonderful teacher there. I didn't like being in a girls' school, I have to admit. That wasn't nice. I was very happy to leave school. And then went to university and had a wonderful time with lots of acting, and then carried on acting.
Did you do acting at uni?
I didn't. I did English at Cambridge.
Oh,
Was-
yes, you're very clever. I forget
No, I'm
this.
not very clever, but I was lucky enough to have some brilliant teachers at school. And then I did lots of plays, and I did the Footlights, and I did lots of tours of Greek amphitheatres with sort of Electra. And if you like acting, Cambridge is like, it's Christmas every day. It's just
Yes.
wonderful.
Amazing.
So that was a great joy and something I still feel very grateful for. And then I just thought, I think I want to carry on doing this. I don't think I'd be very good at anything else. So I did.
And then when you married Freddie, you obviously had your two daughters. And what age are they now?
11 and 9.
11 and 9. And did you have to take a bit of a step back from your career at that point?
Yes, it was astoundingly knackering. I
Yes.
couldn't believe that no one hadn't told me. I
No.
just didn't understand how people had done this for thousands of years.
No.
And I still am tired. I don't think I've not been tired since they were born. And everyone else seems to be fine. So I'm definitely doing something wrong.
You don't look
I'm
tired.
very tired all the time.
Are you working really weird hours and also trying to be mum and doing this whole thing of like doing it all and actually...
Yes, and doing it all badly.
Well,
It's
I don't
a really
know.
horrible
It's not
feeling.
having it all, it's doing it all, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really hard because we don't have someone regular looking after them. So when I've got a hardcore acting job, I get all sorts of different people to pick them both up and take them to... people I've met in shops. I just find anyone local to sort out the daily routine because I don't have anyone regular. So life is chaos, actually.
But have you done that because you want to be hands-on?
No, I've done it because I can't find anyone really nice and normal we can afford.
Yes.
We've got one nice, wonderful art teacher we have Thursday and Friday afternoons. So Thursday and Friday afternoons, if anyone ever wants to see me, that's a golden time and night. But every other time I'm screwed and doing lots of worky things. I do quite a lot of... I'm patron of lots of wonderful charities.
Yes, I've seen this. Let's give them a plug.
Yeah.
Cure International, the Children's Surgery Foundation, School Home Support. What's the latter one of those? School Home Support.
School Home Support's utterly brilliant charity which keeps kids from very tough homes in school and learning. They sort of go after absent children and try and help whatever's going wrong in the home and, address multiple problems and get these completely truant children back in school and getting some exam results. It's brilliant.
Your
readers would love it.
With that in mind, you must have been frustrated by lockdown then. Did you, in retrospect, think the schools should never have been closed
I thought it during
COVID?
it. I was astounded by it.
Actually, we did during it. We were campaigning for it during
Yeah.
it. I like these people who are now saying, yeah, I always argued against lockdown. Well, you didn't at the time. And then you pointed at us and said you should be cancelled.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I wasn't nearly as vocal as you, but I was very vocal to everyone I knew, saying, what on earth are we doing? Not everyone lives in sort of leafy Battersea with tutors and sort of bike rides. Some kids will never recover from this. It was a tragedy. It was awful. But this is what this wonderful charity is brilliant at doing, getting those children back into school. And they're the charity the government should have got to get all those ghost children back. I tried to suggest that to the Education Secretary at the time. Anyway.
But that was, you're talking about the ghost children of lockdown. The CSJ, that's the think tank I mentioned at the beginning of this, did this report saying that basically, I think it was between 100,000 and 200 children had just simply fallen off the register during lockdown, never returned to school. And as far as we can tell, the government still doesn't really know what happened to them. Then there are concerns that, like, familiarly, if an older brother or sister hasn't gone back to school, have the younger siblings. And the whole thing's a nightmare. And what's most frightening about it is that there doesn't seem to be a government requirement to sort of have a register on whether children who should be at school are at school, Sophie, isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm beginning to worry that this country just doesn't care about children. I mean, from sort of shoving little orphans up chimneys in Dickens' time to awful aristocratic neglect to the whole spectrum, I'm just worried that Britain doesn't really care about children. I mean, I've been banging on about sort of screen damage to children for about 3 years now. And now there's a spate of very intelligent articles about how screens are ruining adults' cognitive health. And suddenly everyone's very interested and saying, we've got to look at this. I don't know if people care about children on a sort of, in our national DNA, I don't know if it's very plugged into us to worry about children. And it's not a poverty thing, because if you see poor children in Africa and Latin America, they don't have that utterly haunted look that lots of British very poor children have. And I know that now because I've seen a lot of areas of the country with some of these charities that I definitely didn't know about before. I don't know if it's I'm going to get in so much trouble, but I'm feeling very head banging against wall at the moment. I don't know why. Anyway,
No, but to be fair, before this, I was reading Andrew Norfolk's obituaries, and he was the Times journalist that exposed the grooming gangs.
Legend.
And if you go back on it, and God rest his soul, what an extraordinary talent this industry has lost. And you look back on him trying to blow the whistle repeatedly on what was happening during the grooming scandal, the child rape scandal, let's give it its precise name. And the fact that authorities and the police themselves, I mean, one particular example he had highlighted in Rotherham was the case of a 13-year-old that was found, quotes, blind drunk with 7, I think, all Pakistani men. And the police came in, raided the building and arrested the girl. Didn't even question the blokes that were with her. But anyway, we're getting on to different subjects. But do you think you've become more aware of kind of child safeguarding and welfare because you're a mum? I mean, did you care about this stuff before?
I cared about children, definitely, always. But I volunteered a lot before I had children. But I do feel much more strongly. You see every child as possibly yours, if you know what I mean, or flipped over. I don't know. I'm feeling disillusioned at the moment. I don't know why it's taking so long to do such obvious things. It's very frustrating.
Well, let's get on to the obvious things in a moment, but just tell me about your journey then, particularly when it comes to screens. You're a mum, I'm a mum, loads of parents will be listening and watching this. Let's be honest, for our generation, we're of a similar age, this is a nightmare to navigate. You'll have spoken to your beloved parents, I've spoken to mine, who all vouch. The boomers will say, thank God we didn't have to deal with this when you were growing up. You then speak to your actual children, and yours are a little young, but when they become teenagers, they start pining. Maybe that's the Peep Show revival, by the way. They start pining over your childhood. They want to be brought up in the 80s and 90s where there was no screen. They could just go out on their bikes. We let them roam freely. When did your fears about this creep in? Because I assume, like most mums, you got screens involved at some point.
Well, my kids' school gave them iPads without telling me. And then I'd been I'm incredibly lazy in every other way apart from screen use. Is that they can do whatever they want. I'm not a hands-on. They don't do cello and they don't do Chinese. I don't care.
No.
They can just do what they like. But the screen thing I was quite fanatical about, just because it was so obvious during lockdown that it was such a terrible way to learn. And then, they'd go on to all the games afterwards, and they are completely unputdownable. All these devices, iPads, Chromebooks, you can do loads of ridiculous things on smartphones. And then I had no control because the school had given them these machines.
Yes.
I wasn't robust enough to immediately take them off them. I regret that. I could have just said, no, you're not having them, and had a week of hell, and I wasn't. I was a bit pathetic.
Yes. But we all kind of get carried along with the tide. There is this argument that because everyone else is doing it, we must. The children make that argument. The children behave as if we denied them a screen, they would be treated like the child in our generation that didn't have a telly at home. And let's be honest, those children were sort of treated with a huge amount of suspicion, marginalised, and even, probably, Sophie, bullied, right?
Yeah.
So we don't want our children to be disconnected. Yours are under secondary school, or they're...
One of them's in secondary
One of them's
school.
in year 7, right?
Yeah.
So you're now navigating this whole year 7, they must have a phone
Well,
debate.
I've had to go from being a mother who was terrified of all the class WhatsApp groups and just didn't go anywhere near them. I didn't go to any coffee, not because I don't like it, it's just terrifying. And I think I still have phantoms of girls' school and big groups of women, and I just find them very scary. But then I had to become that maniac mother who got everyone together before year 7 and said, can we maybe not do this? And it was so anti my nature to do that. The sort of noisy, irritating goose at the school gate saying, let's not do it, and sort of
Yes.
holding placards. And it worked quite well.
What did you actually say? You didn't want them to be on iPads at all? What
This was
position
smartphones.
were you coming from? So
This was
phones.
only smartphones.
Go for it, yes.
So there's quite a big cohort in my daughter's year 7 class year who don't have phones, which is brilliant.
Yes.
So they're not isolated, and that's really helpful. But the school, and as far as I can see, pretty much every other independent school in London is going blazing guns on EdTech.
Yes.
So they're on screen for a lot of the day. They come home, they open up the damn thing again, and they're on screen for 2 hours of homework.
Yes.
And it's such a physically unhealthy way to learn. It's so bad for eyesight. It's bad for their posture. It's bad for their sleep rhythms. It's even bad for hormones. And it's terrible cognitively. I've now read so many wonderful books on how this is a very bad way to learn. You don't read properly when you're reading on a screen. You sort of skim read. It's not
Yes.
the same thing. Handwriting implants information so much more profoundly and long-lastingly into the brain than typing does. So unless it's robotics or coding or animation or something specifically tech-related, spreadsheet creation, all that stuff, everything should be handwritten. And I don't know why books are being sacrificed on the altar of this novelty for novelty's sake. EdTech is a hugely unproven business. It's a very successful business. It's worth hundreds of billions of dollars. And barely any of it's been proven. I mean, it hasn't had third-party certification. It hasn't done randomised controlled test trials. It's such a wild west.
Well, actually, there have been a couple of reports that have suggested that some of the mathematical apps that children use, which are very kind of... They're reliant on very sort of animated and emoji-orientated reward.
Which is a disaster.
Well, it worries me because the whole problem with Instagram Reels and TikTok and YouTube Shorts is this idea that you can never get to the end of it. And so every time you're scrolling as a young, vulnerable mind, you're getting this dopamine hit, and actually focusing on anything for a long period of time really requires effort when everything has been sort of fed to you like junk over the course of a screen evening. And if you then have apps rewarding children similarly for their spelling and their times tables, I would imagine that actually sitting down and writing out times tables feels very, very difficult by comparison.
Very difficult and very boring. And then it makes work that needs a bit more of a sustained focus almost impossible. And I think that I've thought for a long time that the decimation of the attention span is as serious as children seeing harmful material, which is mainly what the Online Safety Act has focused on.
Yes.
Very good, that's a noble aim, but seeing thousands of short-form videos of cats is terrible for the brain as well.
I agree.
And it's unputdownable.
Yes, there is. This is a two-pronged thing. We can talk about online harms and all of the campaigning that Molly Russell's father has been doing and others, but I am also concerned about brain rot and time rot.
I know, exactly.
So much time spent scrolling through crap.
22 years of your life, apparently, if kids keep going on the way they're doing, sort of 7 hours a day on screens, it's going to be, more than a quarter of their life.
Just back to the smartphone intervention from year 6 to year 7 then. So did you put on a WhatsApp group, look, girls, I'm concerned about this. I'm not going to give my eldest a smartphone.
I was lucky enough to know Jonathan Haidt by that point.
Yes, let's explain who he is.
Jonathan Haidt, he's a wonderful social psychologist based in New York, and he wrote The Anxious Generation, which has been seismic in making people sit up around the world about what screens and phones are doing to children.
Ironically, it's about the anxiety of Gen Zs and Alphas, but actually it is engendered in our generation, the Xs. And indeed probably the boomers, as grandparents, a huge amount of anxiety that the genie is out of the bottle and we can't put it back in. But it is a compelling read, and he and you and Hugh Grant, we'll get on to him in a moment, have done a number of events together where you have highlighted your concerns. And what's interesting is the conversation was on smartphones, and it's now moving into the EdTech sphere. And it's not just saying, look, should we question whether children should be given phones, access to social media? We're now questioning excessive screen use in general, your Chromebooks, your laptops, your iPads in the school environment. But back to that WhatsApp moment, I mean, were some people like, oh, what a Luddite, stop this?
Well, because I knew Jonathan, I could do a sort of snazzy breakfast where I could bring him and say to all the parents, come and listen to this, don't worry about me, just come and listen to this man talk. So I got a lot of the incoming Year 7 parents to cut. Thank God, because I was friends with him, because he'd read a couple of things I'd written, and I was obviously a huge fan of his, so we'd struck up a friendship. So it was purely down to him that I got a nice big group of, but most parents aren't as lucky as that, and it's really difficult. A lot of campaigning groups are doing very, very well trying to get parents to have the confidence to say, let's not do this. But the reason we need government intervention is that I think it's a middle class thing at the moment. It's middle class parents having the confidence to, rally people around and say, let's not do this. And poorer kids are being destroyed by these things. It's not a patronising thing to say, it's true. They're on them all night long. They're going into schools wrecked, not focusing, eating rubbish, being angry. I know this because of the education charity and so many teachers I've spoken to. That's why it needs to be a big old governmental piece of legislation.
And what do you want in terms of bans on phones, social media and screens?
I don't think kids should have internet-enabled devices till they finish their GCSEs.
Wow. So that could be end of being 16 into 17.
Yeah.
Any internet-enabled device at all?
I think there's a way of making Chromebooks, etc., only access the educational sites that schools want them to, if they insist on all this EdTech, there's definitely a way of doing that. I find the whole research in education at the moment completely ridiculous, because they send children off to research topics for history or science or whatever, just straight onto Google. So I think in general, a really well-researched, prestigious textbook is the way to go for pretty much every single subject, and why schools are getting rid of them in favour of lots of random links and platforms is driving me completely mad.
To ban any internet-enabled device for basically 16s and under, how would you even...
This is my utopia.
I know.
It won't happen.
Why won't it happen?
Because
it can't happen. It's too late.
It's too late. It won't happen. So that's just my ideal, because I think kids aren't bored anymore. They're passive vessels for all sorts of content. They're not developing their imagination anymore. Because they've got these machines, they can be constantly entertained. And it's such a mistake. It's so healthy for a child to get really bored and start making his or her own fun.
Yes.
And that doesn't need to involve any money. I mean, it can involve a sort of piece of paper and a pen, or, you know, if you're a baby, a wooden spoon. You don't need these jazz hands tools to be entertained. In fact, it's very dangerous for the brain. I think children's brains are completely atrophying because they're just, you know, passive little creatures with all this stuff coming at them all day long.
Well, the Haidt evidence does point to that.
Yeah.
You know, basically, Jonathan Haidt, and it is worth reading his book and looking at some of the talks that he's given, which I'm sure are on the internet, and indeed we could probably link one to the show notes. He basically tracks back attainment and attention of young people, and he puts it all into graphs. And many people sort of thought that it was lockdown that had affected reading and writing and other skills, and had created this environment in which younger people particularly are feeling extremely anxious, depressed, prone to self-harm. And actually, no, it's not a lockdown thing. You can trace it back to around 2012, and that was when the first iPhones and other smartphones became available from a cost and other perspective to young teenagers. And at that point, the attainment graphs, and this is a global thing, this isn't a British thing or an American thing, this is globally, except actually in countries like China, but we'll get onto that. The attainment goes down dramatically at that point of 2012. And then conversely, when it comes to the mental health of our children and the problems they're suffering, you see a huge spike. And it cannot be coincidence that it coincides with this huge technological revolution. One of the most stunning things that struck me when I heard you and Hugh Grant and Dr. Haidt speak at a recent event in Kensington down the road was him making the point about how the tech bros do not allow their Silicon Valley nannies to give their own children their tech. And that TikTok itself had circulated a huge amount of internal information saying, good grief, don't give your kids access to this stuff. It's like crack. So these people are not, I mean, you've talked about, does Britain care about its children? Do the technology giants care about our children?
They care about their children. So Steve Jobs made a mistake saying in an interview that he would never let his own 14-year-old have an iPad.
Yeah.
And Bill Gates is on record as saying devices have a really lousy record in the classroom. That's a direct quote. So it's such a sort of hydra, this issue. There's smartphones and social media making children feel incredibly low and depressed, and, you know, all sorts of terrible things are happening. And now the schools are complicit, and that's my big beef.
Okay.
There's a very interesting educational researcher called John Jerrim, which your readers should look up. And he did a huge research project with 3,000 students doing PISA tests in maths, science and reading. And half the group took the tests and revised for them and did them on paper, and half the group did them on the computer. And the paper-based group did 20 scale points better than the computer-based group, and that equates to 6 months of additional learning. There is so much evidence. This brilliant institute, the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, recently published research that there's clear scientific evidence that digital tools impair rather than enhance learning. It's everywhere. This stuff is being proven as absolute rot all over the world.
Well, Sweden's a really interesting example, isn't it? Because Sweden went fully headlong into EdTech. And now my understanding is that they've reverted back to pen and paper in the classroom. What do you know about Sweden?
They have. They've been very brave. It's exactly as you said. They were all guns blazing, very excited, filled the classrooms with tech, as we've done over here. All the results started going down. And rather than dumbing down the exams, which I think is happening here, they said, whoa, we've made a big mistake. This isn't working. And they were very brave. They said, the education minister said, EdTech is a failed experiment. That was her exact phrase. And they got computers out of the classroom and reinvested in books, paper and pen, and the children are doing brilliantly.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
You have admitted that it's impossible almost. I think I agree with you on this. I mean, we've got these Safer Phones Bill going through Parliament. We've got the Online Harms Bill going through Parliament. They are not going to go as far even as Australia in banning social media for under 16s. We don't think, do we?
I don't think so.
No. So we won't have a social media ban. So we certainly will not have a smartphone or internet-enabled device ban for under 16s.
Chance.
That won't happen. But I mean, in your own private world in your own family. Is that what you're going to do with your girls?
No, I can't, because they're given these machines by the schools.
But you'll never give them a phone until
No,
they're 16?
my daughter's got one now. My 11-year-old's got one, because there's everyone sort of started folding.
So they all folded, presumably because they felt left out?
Yeah, I mean, year 7's so hard
It's
anyway,
so hard.
and so stressful.
I know.
And she was already self-conscious about me being a sort of not public figure, but a mum who was
No.
against phones. There's nothing less cool for your mum to be than anti-phones. I mean, what a loser.
We are in a club here because I haven't given my youngest, who's 11 and in year
Well done.
7, a phone.
You win.
But no, I don't win because she's walking around with an iPad, which is just a massive phone, basically. And then also I've noticed, and this has disturbed me, I've been putting the sort of screen time and everything on the iPad. And I think behind my back, when she's saying that she's doing homework, and I bet so many parents can identify with this, listening and watching, that she's doing stuff that I don't want her to do on the Chromebook, but because I'm completely computer illiterate,
Me too, I am too.
I don't really know how to control the Chromebook. Do write in if you know how to put parental controls on a Chromebook. The Daily Tea at telegraph.co.uk or at Daily Tea Podcast on our socials. So I do agree with you that it doesn't matter whether we give them screens or not at home and how we police them. So you're saying no social media for yours. You can just use it for what? What are you saying with this phone?
She just texts her friends.
Yes.
That's it.
Good.
She sort of
Okay.
does sweet little texts. It doesn't do it. It doesn't have anything else on it.
Nothing on it. So that's not a bad idea. It's almost like it's a sophisticated brick phone
Yeah.
that she can make basic
It
communication
looks
with.
cool, but it doesn't do anything.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
that's probably a really good solution. But you're saying also, what difference does that make when as soon as she's in school, she's bombarded with tech anyway? It's a given. I mean, are schools listening? The Swedish example is a good one. When you've done all this campaigning, and this is where Hugh Grant comes in because he's at this event, tearing his hair out, father of 5, making the point as you are, we struggle so much with screens at home, and then you just hand them screens in the classroom. What are you doing?
I think there must be some huge. I do believe that it started out positively. I think lots of heads thought, gosh, this sounds futuristic and progressive, and let's get our children at the forefront of the digital world, and invested heavily in all these machines, all these platforms, trained all their teachers in how to use it, probably signed very long contracts with Apple and Microsoft. Can't get out of them, even though parents are starting to say, I don't think this is a great way to learn. I think they're entrenched in something that it's very interesting. Hugh said at the event you came to, when you ask the teachers or the heads of digital at your kids' schools, this isn't working, they're not learning anything, there's a sort of billowing silence because they can't really defend it because the
No.
kids aren't learning well. But they're not in a position to get rid of it. So an investigative journalist needs to shine a torch on what the hell is happening, because it's a really bad way
Look,
to learn.
My initial suspicion was you probably have competing tech firms going into schools early because once you're either Google Drived, you are for life.
You're a life customer.
I remember, do you remember back when we were at school and the big apples that were like purple or green or something?
We
and
didn't have apples.
We had apples in
you?
our school and
Wow.
they were long, big things and we were sort of, girls, this is a computer. This is how you turn it on. This was slightly after the era of the BBC Micro. And then I kind of like was used to Apple, and this was before the explosion of the iPhone or anything. In fact, Apple's stock, I wish I'd bought some, let's be perfectly honest. And I kind of remained an Apple person for life. There must be some theory from the
Definitely.
tech bros. You catch them at primary school and you've got them for life. They become the whole war between Gates and Apple. You become a PC person, you become a Mac person. You're someone that's always saving in Google Drives. What I'm saying is if my kids are Google Driving their homework when they're in an office, they're going to use that operating system just because it's what they know. So it's valuable to have the customers caught early. I don't know whether it's conspiracy or cock up. From the teacher's perspective, let's just balance this out a bit. You know, my oldest child at the moment is doing GCSEs. She's a high achiever. She's kind of not to be fair, she self-regulates brilliantly on social media and apps and things, which probably may be the secret to some of her academic success. But when I look at what she's doing, she's done a load of test essays, she's put them in a drive, the English teacher can mark them immediately, she can have conversations with others, materials are put on there, she's still got her great expectations and her much ado about nothing, but she's also able to immediately access online lots of different materials. She can upload instantly practice papers. There is a functionality to digitization of learning that does make life a lot easier for children. And you and I might be being Luddite about it because they understand these operating systems far better than you and I ever will. And as they get older, maybe there is a greater case for the use of EdTech. Maybe you're saying, I don't want to put words in your mouth, you don't want it in primary schools, but you can understand the use for it when they're like 14, 15, 16?
Well, I think your daughter sounds a real outlier, because I think most children from the sort of research I've read are so distracted by these machines. So she does sound unusually sort of industrious and conscientious. And I agree, it can be brilliantly useful for teachers, especially those in huge state schools. There are platforms like No More Marking, which are really, really clever, and the children still has to handwrite, but something happens where the teacher is helped and it's all scanned, and I can't quite remember, it's Daisy Christodoulou, very clever educationalist. It's really helpful without taking away the fine motor skills and deliberate thought of a good education. And I think you're right. There are ways in which it can be used very judiciously, and I think the best performing education systems in the world, mainly in East Asia, use it like that, fanatically carefully and cautiously. I think what's happened in Britain is we've gone very trigger happy,
Yes.
and all sorts of subjects and topics are online which really aren't helped by being online. You know, online comprehensions of an online passage of a book, rather than just reading the book throughout the term, a physical copy of it and handwriting responses, that's just better. You know, making a PowerPoint is not as good as making a sort of handwritten, hand-drawn project. That's something that will stay with you for life. You'll remember it. Handwriting is personal and unique, so
Yes.
it creates a relationship with you and what you're being learned.
It's literally your signature. I mean,
Yes.
the individualism of it is
Arial
being
and Times
lost.
New Roman is not going to create a wonderful relationship with you and the Norman invasion. You're going to forget everything.
True.
I think we've gone way too far, and I think I really want parents to be confident enough to say to teachers in every kind of school, how is this better than a book, paper and pen? And if the teacher can answer them and convince them, brilliant. But in most cases, they won't be able to. So the fact that children are typing instead of handwriting is a very serious problem, because they're not learning to process what they're learning and handwrite responses to it, which is what makes you really acquire deep knowledge and critical thinking. And it always brings me back to the Orwell quote that if people can't write well, they can't think well. And if they can't think well, then other people do their thinking for them.
But then it strikes me, with the government dragging its heels and probably influenced by trade deals with Trump and demands on tech services, taxes, and goodness knows what, lots of other things going on in the background that you and I probably aren't even aware of. This is going to require a parental revolution.
I agree
And
with you.
are we there yet? Because you've discussed, you and I and our demographic, you know, very cosy. We're popping to a private school in Kensington and listening to Hugh Grant opine the state of things. That's not accessible to all. You know, we've also got a lot of parents who, to be fair, the whole dynamic of society has shifted. You know, we've got parents working back to back,
I know.
shift working, mums on the day, dads off to the factory at night.
That's why it's so irresponsible to plonk children on distracting machines for their education, I think.
Childcare is unaffordable. You know, people are using sometimes screens as
I
babysitters
know.
in the evening because it's not family friendly. Nothing.
I know
The
it
tax system isn't. You've said yourself, and let's be honest, you know, you're married to a royal and probably not doing too badly in the showbiz world, in inverted commas, the acting world. It's unaffordable to have full-time live-in nannies in central London, for goodness sake. So none of this is tailored to us giving our children this sort of wholesome childhood we want to. The other thing that Hike makes a great point about is we're underprotecting them online and overprotecting them in real life because we're worried they're going to be snatched by, I don't know, county lines drug runners or paedophiles. I mean, maybe, is it our fault? Is it grown-ups? We haven't been grown up enough.
I think, I don't know if this is a circuitous way of answering it. I think what needs to happen so that parents all over the country can get a better grasp on this, I think we have to go towards the doctors. And there's a brilliant group called Health Professionals for Safer Screens, and they're paediatricians, psychiatrists, optometrists, speech and language therapists. They're all at the coalface seeing what damage screen use in and out of school is doing to children. I think it needs to be a public health warning. They're saying that even 11 to 17-year-olds shouldn't have more than 1 to 2 hours of screen time per day. That's in school, out of school, it's school laptop. Screen time is just the same thing to the brain. It keeps children awake, it sort of damages their eyesight. I don't know if I'm answering your question properly.
No, you are, but I'm also thinking, how do we mount this parental revolution? Like, what's your message to parents?
The NHS needs to come on board. Apparently in the sort of baby book new mums are given, or the sort of pamphlet or whatever
the red
it is.
book.
The red book.
Yeah.
There's nothing about screen time.
The red book for the uninitiated is this book you get when you have a baby. It was read in my day. I don't know. Didn't you?
No.
I've got 3 of them somewhere. And you take the measurements and, you know, what percentile are they on, and are you breastfeeding or bottle feeding, and immunisations and all the rest of it. Yeah, that's so true. Nothing about screens, nothing.
No.
But it's almost as if it's just a fait accompli now. Like, it's expected that they're on screens, so go with the flow, go with the 2025 flow.
That's another thing that needs to be addressed. People thinking that kids will be digitally literate if they're on screens all day, in school and out. That's the big hypocrisy of all these giants in tech not allowing their children near screens in school or out of school. Everyone has to know that. They're creating the stuff that we're consuming, yet they don't let their own families near it. Reaching every parent in Britain, I think, has to be through the doctors. I think it has to be through the NHS, doing a big old public health warning. I think it needs to be in the red books. I think it just has to be, screens are going to damage your children's brains and their physical well-being. And it is seismic. It's in ways we can't understand yet. And everyone should look up these wonderful doctors because they're very persuasive and interesting about it.
Is anyone listening? When you've been campaigning, are you getting through to anyone? Education ministers, shadow cabinet ministers, head teachers?
I'm mainly preaching to the converted at the moment.
Yes.
Catherine Burblesing's a great friend.
Yeah, the head of Michaela
Yes.
The head of the Michaela Community School in Wembley.
She's fanatical about it,
Yes.
saying that, and she even thinks that dyslexic children do better handwriting. And there's a big thing, for people who are pro-tech saying, well, what about the dyslexic children? They must type. And she's, one of the greatest successes we have in our education system. And she says, no, they must handwrite even more. I don't know if that's true. I'm not a teacher. But anyway, it's interesting. The Heritage School in Cambridge, which is screen-free and such a magical, brilliant school. The King Alfred School in Dudley. I've got a huge cohort of wonderful, sensible, interesting people who are on the same page, but it's very hard to make other people listen. And I don't know why when we've got all the research.
I know, but can we just end on a hopeful note? Because maybe it's just because I've got more into this subject and you're clearly very, very passionate about it. Is the tide slightly turning? Now, I say that because I mentioned my daughter earlier in self-regulation. My son is less good at regulating his social media and other screen occupations. And my husband observed recently, that he couldn't sit down and watch a whole football match because he's grown so used to just scrolling through the goals, which is a bit depressing. There is a problem with
most teenagers.
Yeah, and teenagers can't sit down and watch whole films and stuff.
No way, too
which
boring.
For somebody in your industry is
Great.
disturbing, right? Yeah. But I don't know. I think that we had the sort of post-millennial generation, the first of the Gen Zers, be at the coalface of this. I think they're looking at it. There's been surveys, by the way, Sophie, where you ask Gen Zs, would you give your children smartphones? And they say no.
I think the revolution has to come from all the young people. I totally agree. There's a wonderful girl called Freya India who talks about what you talked about at the beginning of the interview, this deja vu for a childhood she'd never had. That's the wrong word. What's the word? Nostalgia for a childhood she never had. And that brilliant piece in the Times about a year ago where they interviewed about 10 different teenagers from all over the place, and they said to them all, if social media and smartphones were banned for all of you, would you be okay with that? And they all said, God, yes.
Please.
Please.
But that's why blanket banning is a good idea, because there has to be strength in numbers. Either they all have it or none of them have it, which brings us back to your WhatsApp conundrum when you were trying to make sure that the Year 7s didn't all have smartphones.
No,
we have to leave it there. You've got a school run. I've got to run to Parliament.
I've actually got a radio play where I'm playing a mole.
You're playing a mole?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like
Rise now.
How are you going to speak like a mole?
I haven't worked it out yet. I'll
Are you going
work
to,
it out on the way there.
Are you going to channel your inner Penfold from Danger Mouse, who's the only kind of famous bespectacled mole? Oh, and then mole
from Wind in the Willows.
From Wind in the Willows.
No, I'm going to do a very original mole.
I'll
let you know when
Are you
it's
going
out.
to do an accent or
maybe Birmingham? I'm going to think about it on the way.
All right, you think about it. Sophie Winkleman, Sophie Windsor, Big Suze from The Peep Show. However we should refer to you. Thank you very much indeed for appearing on the Daily Tea today.
Thank you for having me.